following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFA coming to you with a review of the Transformers Generations Legacy Velocitron Speedia 500 Collection Deluxe Class Autobot Burn Out. And what a mouthful that was. So, this is the latest figure in the Velocitron Speedia 500 collection that I've added to my Transformers collection, and looking around at the ones I've collected and reviewed so far, I think Burnout might be the last of the, well, no, she's not. I thought she was the last one of these to review, but, as I lose my train of thought for a second there, I thought this was the last of the Velocitron figures that I have to review, but there's still at least one more that I have to get to. So, Burnout is from the Diaclone universe, you can see right there. So, for those of you wondering, who exactly is this character? So, Burnout is based on the black Diaclone version of the Transformers Generation 1 character of Autobot Skids. Skids is was one of the 7 regular-sized Autobots introduced in the 1985 lineup of Transformers Generation 1 during its second year, and unlike the other Autobots introduced in the 1985 lineup, Skids was successfully marketed by Hasbro and being one of the mainline characters and not a character created for the cartoon such as Alpha Trion, Ion, or Elita 1, nor a character who was not scheduled to be introduced to the Transformers lineup until the following year in 1986, such as the Autobot Combiners, Superior, and Defensor. The point I'm trying to get at is that Skids is unfortunately earned the nickname of the Forgotten Autobot because in the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon show, despite appearing in only 2 episodes, Skids appeared as a background character and not a mainline character, and the joke with Transformers fans over the years has been that Hasbro, despite marketing Skids as a mainline character, forgot to do an episode centered around him. And so Burnout is one of actually up to 4 Transformers characters who is a repaint of Skids. There's 5 different versions of the mold that Hasbro took from Takara Tomi's Diaclone Robots line to make Skids. The black version here was turned into the character Burnout. It has been confirmed that next year for Wave 2 of the Legacy line, the silver version of this mold is going to be done, and it's already been done before in the past where he got a silver repaint of Skids as the character of Autobot Crosscut. Whether or not we're going to get the last 2, the 3rd and 4th versions of the Skids mold released in East from as repaints of this mold is uncertain at this point. Right, and but I think if we were to get all of the characters that Skids has been repainted from, I personally wouldn't mind if Hasbro and Takara Tomy were to use the molds again. And in addition to Burnout here, the black version of Skids, and then the silver version known as Crosscut, there's also a red version that was turned into the character of Autobot Reboost, and then there's an orange version of this mold, of the Skids mold. It's actually like a rusty orange. It's similar to the shade of orange used for Wreck-Gar and the Junkions, and that was turned into the character of Autobot Screech. So whether or not we're going to get Reboost and Screech each is uncertain at this point. Technically, this mold has already been used 3 times. It's also been used on the Wave 3 Transformers Legacy figure of Crankcase, who I'm pointing to back there behind me. But with the release of Burnout in the Velocitron collection and the announcement that Crosscut is probably going to be a mainline figure next year in Wave 2 of the Legacy line, here's hoping that we get Reboost and Screech as well. So without further delay, let's bring focus of the review back to Burnout. Now, so yeah, here's Burnout, the black version of Skids. The red racing stripe is identical to Skids, and one interesting fact to note about Burnout, despite the only difference between Burnout and Skids mold-wise is that Burnout has a different face sculpt, and it's the same face sculpt that's used on Crosscut. So once Legacy Crosscut gets released next year, Crosscut is actually going to be more or less a straight-up repaint of Burnout, unless Hasbro and Cartoni decide to give them all new weapons. But with all the repaints we've gotten of figures that have each come with the exact same set of weapons, it's very likely that Crosscut will be a straight up repaint. But one thing to note about Burnout here, just like the previous Legacy Velocitron Speedia 500 collection figure we looked at, which was Deluxe Class Autobot Road Rocket, Burnout is in fact a female Transformers character. So yes, Burnout here is a Fem Bot, and I was really surprised to learn that when it was announced. After that, I was unaware before the Velocitron figure was announced that Burnout is in fact a Fem Bot. Fembot just like Road Rocket, RC, Alita 1, Windblade, 8, but that is something interesting to know about Burnout. So yeah, there she is in her alt mode of a hatchback sports car. Got another image of her sports car alt mode. You got some artwork here that folds around the corner on this side of the box. Looks of Burnout in an action pose, charging against some Decepticons. You got a slight close-up of that same image here, and there showing off her new head sculpt. So just like Road Rocket, the only difference between Burnout and the figure she's repainted from, which is Legacy Skids, the only difference in the actual molding is that she has a new head sculpt. And coming on here to the back of the box, you've got Burnout in her vehicle mode, you've got her in her robot mode, and I love how in the product photo it's trying vaguely to mimic, be a mirror image of the artwork of her here on this side of the box. And she transforms back and forth between both modes in just 15 steps, so it's pretty interesting to see. So I pretty much I've said everything else, and the reason why I blabbed with some background information on Skids and Crosscut and the other versions of this mold is because, unfortunately, as far as I'm aware of, this is only the second action figure of Burnout that's been released. The first one was the original Generation 1 Diaclone version, which was released, I believe, exclusively by Takara Tomy. I could be wrong. But yeah, Burnout is one of the most obscure Transformers characters that's out there right now, and for those of you who are familiar, for Transformers fans who are familiar with Skids and how he is somewhat of a not so popular Transformers character, unfortunately for Burnout here, she is even less popular than Skids is, so I pretty much said all there is to say about Burnout, apart from a few comic book appearances. She hasn't really been much of a prominent Transformers character since her name and identity was given to the black Diaclone version of Skids. So hopefully she will shine one day and become a more popular Transformers character, but for now, whatever popularity she is enjoying right now in the Transformers franchise is primarily because of the release of the new Deluxe Class Legacy figure of her. So with that in mind, let's get her out of her box and take a close look at her in vehicle mode. Alright, so here's Burnout out of her box and in her alt mode, and unfortunately she does have the same weapon storage as Skids, where the only real place to put her weapons is to attach them on the sides and roof. You can attach them all at once and have a huge cannon hanging off the roof if you want, but it is all personal preference, so unfortunately as far as being a robot in disguise, the only way to achieve that is to have all the weapons taken off. So here's Burnout with her weapons attached. And again, if you have Legacy Skids, pretty much the only difference in vehicle mode is that all the blue plastic and paint on Skids has been switched out with black here for Burnout. And she has the same stripes that are found on Skids. It's exact same stripes, exact same colors. One difference to note about Burnout in vehicle mode that distinguishes her from Skids is that she has the added bonus of actually having proper taillights painted on the back of her, so that's a really visually a nice thing to see there. You got the molded in fuel tank right there, which is pretty nice. And for a size comparison, here she is with Skids, so yeah, pretty much everything on Skids that's blue is black here on Burnout. One paint app where Skids has Burnout technically slightly beaten out is that Skids' Autobot logo is on a white background, and Burnout's Autobot logo is on a clear background, so fortunately for my camera, it makes the Autobot logo on Burnout look slightly darker than Skids, even though it's the same shade of red paint used on there. on there, and yeah, so if you want to, you can put the weapons on opposite sides. You can have Burnout and Skids be mirror images of each other if you want. And again, Burnout has the painted taillights, whereas Skids is taillights are unpainted, so that additional paint app really does make Burnout stand out from Skids. And just because I know you guys want to see what it looks like, so removing all of her weapons. Here is Burnout in her regular vehicle mode, so here she is trying to be a robot in disguise, with the exception of the two hexagon-shaped 5mm meter ports here on the back to allow for weapon storage. Same with the one on the roof. It does pretty much look pretty great. One thing to note about Burnout is because she is, you can see it if I put her at an angle like this. Because she is black, her sunroof is unpainted clear plastic, just like her side windows and the windshield. So that's a pretty nice thing to see. On Skids, because he's blue, Hasbro and Diaclone painted the windshield black, so visually it is pretty eye-catching here. I don't know if my camera's going to pick it up, but one thing to note is that right here, the manufacturer's label is actually printed on the inside of the roof, so with unpainted clear plastic used on Burnout's windshield, you can see the manufacturer's label where it has Hasbro and Diaclone's names and the year that the mold was designed on there, even though it's backwards, looking at it from underneath, it's still visible there. So it's pretty funny to see that difference in paint apps. And so as my mind works faster than my tongue, there's more I want to say about Burnout, but again, because she's such an obscure character, there really isn't much else to say. Just like Skid, she does have some invisible head syndrome, so before we actually get her transformed into her robot mode, there's her new head sculpt up there, very compared to Skids. One of the main differences is that Burnout has a mouth plate, and it actually makes her face look a little like Optimus Prime's more than any other Transformers character, so. But for the delay, let's get it, hit Burnout transformed into her robot mode, and we will wrap up the review. One last thing I will like to point out, though, while she's still in her vehicle mode, just like Skids, the way the figure transforms, you can actually have the car doors open up. They don't open up into a wide angle, so don't try and force them all the way to 90 degrees because you will snap them off, but it does help this vehicle, especially looking at it from the front, to being somewhat in a robot in disguise, in that you actually have actual working doors in vehicle mode, so that's one thing I enjoy about the Skids mold. Alright, and here is Burnout transformed into her robot mode, and here's a close-up of her new head sculpt. Again, it's a mouth plate with a slight head crest, and I don't know if it's just because I'm a fan of Optimus Prime, but her face looks more like Optimus Prime than any other Transformers character with the way her mouth plate and her face is shaped. But I really enjoy it. I think it's a great look for Burnout trying to look like Optimus Prime. But yeah, just like comparing Road Rocket with Legacy Prime RC, comparing Burnout here with the figure she's repainted and retooled from of Legacy Skids. The only difference between the two of them is the robot mode head sculpt, so I overwent the articulation during Skids' review, so I'm going to not cover it here on Burnout, but some subtle differences if you desire to distinguish Burnout and Skids from each other is one thing you can do is on either one of these figures you can not do the final step in the transformation of having the wheels act as gap fillers for the bottom of the feet, and if you want, you can have the wheels remain flipped out, and that is slightly more accurate to the original Generation 1 action figures. And in addition to the tail lights of her vehicle mode, another paint app that Burnout has that Skids is lacking in is her the sculpting detailing on her shoulders are actually painted. They're red in the center with silver outlines. Granted, Skids does have silver paint here on his thighs, which are sculpted in it's blue plastic, just like the rest of his legs, and they're unpainted here on Burnout. But I personally think Burnout has slightly more paint apps than Skids does with those tail lights and the shoulder detailing on here. So because Burnout has painted shoulder detailing, in addition to leaving the wheels out, one thing you can do, and apparently this was something that showed up on some of the product images for Skids. Is if you want, you can have the shoulders rotated the opposite direction on Skids, and so if you want him to look like his IDW counterpart, you can have the wheels facing forward. So in addition to giving Skids a different look, it can also help to further distinguish him from Burnout by having those two subtle differences in the transformations, with the shoulders facing the opposite direction and the wheels with basically, actually, because the shoulder joints have the wheels on them, having the wheels in different spots can help to further distinguish Burnout from Skids and not have them be entirely repaints of each other if you are inclined to do so. So it is nice that you can have different variations in the robot mode. They aren't that drastic. The differences aren't that drastic, but they're enough that if you want these guys to not be twins or look-alike doppelgangers, would be a more appropriate grammar to use. Because it is nice that you can move some parts around to give them even more distinction than what they have with their paint jobs and their different head sculpts. And of course, you also have the added distinction of giving them the different configured weapons. Here on Burnout, I have her with the 2 laser guns combined together into the 3-barrel laser gun, and then the blue energy weapon, I have her holding it as the axe, and then here on Skids, I have all the weapons combined into a large cannon weapon. And that's pretty much it. The other paint apps on the figures are virtually identical. You've got yellow headlights, you got the silver, you got the grill section for the vehicle mode, which ends up forming the robot mode chest painted silver. The bumpers are different colors than the rest of the figure. On Skids, his bumper is black, and on Burnout, because she's black, her bumper section is gunmetal gray. The parts on both figures that are red, such as the robot mode pelvis and the pelvises and the robot mode feet, those are the same shades, exact same shades of red plastic, so nothing new there. And it's the same with the joint in the back of the neck that keeps the windshield backpack attached to the figure. It's the same shade of red plastic there, so that is one thing that Skids and Burnout are identical with, is having the parts of them that are red being the exact same shade of red. But overall, I do really enjoy how Burnout's head sculpt, and despite being an obscure character, I really enjoy having this figure of her in my Transformers collection. Like so many of the Transformers figures being released in the Legacy line, this has become the first and only action figure of this Transformers character that I have in my Transformers collection, so that was one of the main motivators for me to get Burnout and add her to my Transformers. And also another factor for me personally is black is my favorite color, so I really enjoy Transformers characters that have black as the main paint job, so Burnout is right up there with the DK-2 Guard, which are the black Diaclone version of Ironhide, which I renamed Steel Pelt, and also Nemesis Prime, Trailbreaker, Sky Warp, and other Transformers characters such as Optimus Primal that have black as the main paint job. She's right up there with visually being one of my favorite looking Transformers action figures. So do I recommend getting Transformers Legacy Velocitron Burnout and adding her to your Transformers collection? I do, because despite having a few flaws, the Legacy Skids mold, it's my favorite deluxe class figure from Wave 1 of the Legacy line, and Burnout is a phenomenal repaint. Even though I haven't really gone over her articulation, just transforming her from vehicle mode to robot mode for the first time, her joints don't feel that tight and they don't feel that loose. They feel that as though they all have a decent amount of tension needed to make the figure fully enjoyable without any fear of parts being either too tight or too loose to transform and mess around with. So I do highly recommend you get Burnout if you can find her. It is a pain that she's a Walmart exclusive figure here in the United States, but considering how hard some other Transformers action figures that have been released as exclusives have been, and being a Walmart exclusive isn't necessarily the worst place that Transformers figures could be exclusively released. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Please stay tuned for my next review. And until next time, you guys, stay safe, stay healthy. Transformer World out. Goodbye, everyone.